why would someone sell you their house subject to, or how are we getting these deals? It's pretty much two things. It can sometimes be a third, but pretty much two things. They're either behind on their payments, so they're in foreclosure of some sort, or low equity. So a lot of these I deal with direct to seller. These can be on the market, nice houses. They bought the house a year ago, and let's say they bought it for $250,000 in 2022. Let's just say in like January, and they have a 4% interest rate. So if they go to sell it in January of 2023, the house is probably worth the same amount or maybe even less. The interest rates are now 8%, and the house is still worth $250K. So if someone wants to go buy this on the market, they're going to try and list it at like 270, right? If they pay 6% in closing or in commissions, so they're going to have 3% to the buyer's agent, 3% to the seller's agent. They're going to have another 2 to 2.5% in closing costs. So let's just say 90% is what they're going to actually walk away with. So what's 250,000? Let's just do 270. Let's say they sell it on the market for $270,000. 90% of 270 is 243. So they bought it for 250. Their payout, even if they get it for 20 grand more, is they're only getting about 243. So unless they put a huge amount of money down, they're making pretty much no money at the sale. And especially if this price is going to drop towards 250, now this number becomes like 223, and they could actually have to come out of pocket to sell their house. So instead of them losing money or making nothing to sell their house, people will come in and they'll say, hey, instead of you paying a bank to pay all this interest and get a loan to pay off another loan, why don't I just pay your agent commission, the $5,000, and I'll just pay you like, $2 grand, whatever you want to negotiate with them. And then for the buyer, you're $7,000 into the house, and you take over the 4% interest rate instead of getting 10, 20, whatever percent down and take over an 8% interest rate. So for them, they're now making a little bit of money instead of losing. And for you, you get the lower interest rate. You get to take the deed, right? So you now own the house with the deed, but the note will stay in the seller's name. So you're just taking over their payments, but you own the property. So that's one way, low equity. It's a win-win. The agent can get paid. The seller doesn't have to lose money, and they can just walk away. Foreclosure, a lot of times someone is like 20 grand behind on their mortgage. They might have the same thing where it's like a 3% interest rate, and they can't afford the payment, obviously. They need to get out, and their house might be worth $300K. They could owe, the same thing. They could owe like $200K on the mortgage, but it needs $30K in repairs, whatever it is. Instead of them, they don't have time to go on the market and sell it. They don't have time, for someone to buy it cash maybe because they might not have enough equity. So you're going to catch up to 20,000 and just take over their 3% interest rate. You could then flip it, put it on the market. You could hold it as a rental. You could sell it owner finance at an 8% interest rate. But basically, they have to either be behind on their payments and need to walk away from it, or they don't have any equity to where they can't sell it on the market. There's not enough to cash them out either with a conventional loan or with a cash offer. So that's why someone would actually let you take over their payments.
How do you discern if somebody has low equity? How do you know?
How do you know if someone has low equity? If I go to comparable houses, what are they selling at? The ARV, right? The after repair value. If they bought this house last year in good condition for $250, it's not going to be worth any more than $250 this year, especially when the interest rates went up. So the equity is based on their principal balance, like their loan amount, versus the value, the difference between those two. So if you owe 240 and your house is worth 250, you have 10,000 in equity. But if you've only owned the house for a year, you got to pay closing costs, commissions, realtor fees, title policy. this 10K in equity is really like negative, because to sell it on the market, you're losing more than that. So the equity just means the loan balance versus the actual market value of the house.